We are going to start part number 11 on the topic of dimensional gates, which you can see is going a long way and will even go on further. Therefore, do not expect us to finish in the next conference because there will be more. Let's talk once again about spiritualism. I suppose everyone has seen something similar to this, a Ouija board, which usually has, as you can see in the center of the image, a 5-pointed star, in this case made with a single stroke. The Ouija board is a board made to communicate with spirits. There are people who believe that they are the dead people who, through a medium, can make the glass move or whatever they move across the board. Sometimes there may be an apparition, there may not be. It may be that things simply move there because there is not a single medium, but there are several people who come together to do this. In this case, this is extracted from a page where they themselves tell you what the word Ouija probably comes from, which seems to be a derivative of the French and German words yes, from oui and ja. Be that as it may, look who promotes it, the International Institute of Astrology, occult science, almost nothing, but there are people who, for them, this is a very good thing. I suppose that practically all of you who are following the conference live, like all the people who are going to see this conference once it is uploaded to the internet, practically those who have not done Ouija will know people who have put it into practice, and normally I suppose that you will have heard of it. Strange experiences when people do this, and usually none that gives a good vibe. Well, look at the main thing that I now want to show you with all this. Apart from letters, numbers, etc., of yes and no, sometimes Ouija boards normally have different characteristics, different drawings on the board, different symbols. Well, I would like you to stay precisely with the 5-pointed star, about which we talked and many conferences ago about it, but evidently that symbol still means many more things. We also saw in the previous conference how the people of the Eastern world also use it with the elements, etc. And for these people, based on the esoteric world as well, and based on the Gnostic movements, it is also something quite positive for them. You're going to be quite perplexed when now, in a few moments, I suppose the same thing will happen to you as it did to me, we put on a video of Walt Disney. In this video, we are going to see Donald Duck, and look at the title it has, In Mathmagic Land. It's a mix between mathematics and magic. In the land of mathematics and magic, all mixed together. You will see that it is a video that has no waste. It lasts about 20 minutes, and you'll realize from the very beginning how some signs appear, and an explanation that, of course, done entertainingly, as all Walt Disney did, is very enjoyable for kids, and it is a way of instructing in the Pythagorean school and symbologies about the 5-pointed star, its meaning, etc. And you will see that truly everything has a mathematical relationship, and that people placed in secret societies, Gnostic movements, etc., know this very well. But they evidently apply it from another perspective. We as Christians can really see what is behind all this, and they will see it as something simply positive. Obviously, mathematics is mathematics for everyone, and God has created everything practically mathematically, as we have seen in previous lectures. You will see how in this video images that we have recently talked about in these conferences are expressed or shown. And Walt Disney did this quite a few years ago, you already know that, right? Curiously, in this photograph that we have put here to illustrate, he designed a round city with a nucleus where there would be a climate that could be controlled. Okay, let's do some very, very slight history on Walt Disney. Here he is. This man, they say, of Irish origin. It says, in his youth, Disney was part of a Masonic-type organization called the Demolay Order. According to his own testimony, his membership in this organization played a very important role in his formation. You know, other sources talk about him reaching the 33rd degree in Freemasonry. Well, be that as it may, he evidently did not deny that he was in an order of this type, that this marked him, and so it did. We'll see, in fact, in all his drawings, we see it perfectly in all the stories told at Disney, like magic, above all. Although the end of the video will surprise you, as it surprised me, because it is the only time I hear the word God in one of his films. Look, the Order of Demolay, what it consisted of. The Order of Demolay was founded in the city of Kansas, state of Missouri, in the United States of America in 1919. This is the largest organization of young male leaders in the world, which it seeks for them to interact with other young people, to improve their public speaking, and to be leaders in their region. This youth organization is sponsored by Freemasonry, although you do not need to have a relationship with a Freemason to join, but you must be a young male over 12 and under 21 years old who believes in a single living God and shows true interest in the ideals of the order. You already know that within Freemasonry there are two quite different sectors, theoretically, some in which you necessarily have to believe in someone, and others in which you can become an atheist, theoretically. Well, these are from the group that theoretically believes in a living God. Demolay is open to young men between the ages of 12 and 21. Throughout its history, more than 1 million young people have joined this order, including congressmen, presidents of the United States, and well-known people in our environment. Several of them recognize the great work that the Demolay Order does for society and how it has helped them succeed in their lives. Among them, Walt Disney is recognized, unlike any other fraternity and or school of leadership, is that its members consider each other as brothers and are called as such. The Freemasons are recognized as the uncles of any Demolay. Here you have its shield of the Demolay Order. You see that it is precisely riddled with 10 5-point stars in the middle, a half moon on its shield, and you can also see the 5-point cross, etc. Founded by a Freemason, Demolay is closely patterned after Freemasonry, and like Freemasonry, members are initiated into Demolay through a ritual and allegorical program. It is, however, not directly connected to Freemasonry. Demolay considers itself part of the Masonic family, along with other groups of young people such as the Rainbow Girls, the Daughters of Job, or the adopted wives of the Masons, the Eastern Stars. Well, the names we see where they move, right? The requirements to enter the Demolay Order is to be between 12 and 21 years old, be a good person and believe in one God. The Demolay Order is not a religion. That is why within it they prefer not to touch on political or religious issues to avoid conflicts between its members, but each one is called to respect the ideas of others, theoretically the same as Freemasonry does. Demolay is governed by 7 cardinal virtues which are the soul of the structure of good citizens. Those sacred precepts are filial love, reverence for sacred things, courtesy, companionship, fidelity, purity, patriotism. Likewise, it bases its work on 3 main bastions: the Holy Bible, the flag of his country, and school books. The history of the Demolay Order is divided into 2 parts. The first deals with how the creation and evolution of the organization, and the second is that of the great and noble hero and martyr Jacques Demolay, from whom, due to his heroic example, his name is taken to the order. You already know who this character was. Well, it is going to tell us here. The Demolay Order was founded on March the 18th, 1999 by Frank Sherman Land, a successful businessman in Kansas City, Missouri. Does this remind you a little of the same way of the Rotarians, etc.? How they work, helping others, creating values, etc., etc.? All apparently very healthy and very beautiful. During the First World War, he realized the difficult time that youth were going through when they lost their parents after the First World War. May I also remind you how the Red Cross was formed? Seeing the misfortunes of war and such, it is, wham, something needs to be done. He decided that an organization was needed in which these young people could associate with others and learn responsibility and other important life skills. An orphan boy named Louis Gordon Bauer and 8 of his friends became the first Demolays. Look who they basically work with people who have problems in their homes due to lack of parents, etc. It's curious, it's the same way of working that the Jesuits have, which I suppose they still have to use, and they used orphaned children to achieve certain objectives, mentalizing those children to work when they were older under the orders of the Pope. They were like their father. The organization grew rapidly, and at the end of 1921, Land realized that he had to dedicate full time to the new organization. As the organization continued to grow, the Masonic fraternity had certain interests in Demolay, and the Masons gave their official recognition and approval to a system in many North American states. Today, many Demolay members wish to join Freemasonry. Others remain satisfied with what they learned in the Demolay Order and practice the 7 virtues throughout their lives. The Order of Demolay continued its growth, initiating new members and establishing new chapters in each state of the United States of America, and then continued to grow to Canada and was considered an international organization. Since then, the organization has spread to many other countries around the world, with Canada, the Philippines, Aruba, Australia, Brazil, Bolivia, Germany, Italy, Japan, Portugal, Peru, Uruguay, and other countries around the world being officially recognized. You see that the organization has grown a lot, right? Therefore, how many people who must already be of a certain age as children pass through here, those who must continue passing by now, and the concepts that they are learning from there, theoretically under the umbrella of believing in a God, in a living God. Satan is not so stupid. Obviously, on the one hand, he will make people believe that he does not exist. On the other hand, he will make people believe in God. But on the other hand, he will put a wedge where necessary to take people, even if theoretically they believe in God, wherever he wants, and teach them those concepts, which are so recognized by the esoteric world, right? Well, before moving on to this section about the Ouija board, we are precisely going to show this video of Donald Duck in Mathematic Land. Let's see it.
But it's strange. That's an odd-looking creature. What kind of a crazy place is this? What are you? Squirrels?
Pi is equal to 3.141592653589747, etc., etc., etc.
Huh? Hello? Hello?
Hello, Donald.
That's me. Where am I?
Mathemagic Land.
Mathematic Land? Never heard of it.
It's the land of great adventure.
Well, who are you?
I'm a spirit, the true spirit of adventure.
That's for me. What's next?
A journey through the wonderland of mathematics.
Mathematics? That's for eggheads.
Eggheads? Now hold on, Donald. You like music, don't you?
Yep.
Well, without eggheads, there would be no music. Come on. Let's go to ancient Greece, to the time of Pythagoras, the master egghead of them all.
Pythagoras?
The father of mathematics and music.
Mathematics and music?
Ah, you'll find mathematics in the darndest places. Watch. First, we'll need a string. Stretch it good and tight, plunk it. Now divide in half. Plunk again. You see? It's the same tone, one octave higher. Now divide the next section. And the next. Pythagoras discovered the octave had a ratio of 2 to 1. With simple fractions, he got this. And from this harmony in numbers developed the musical scale of today.
By golly, you do find mathematics in the darndest places.
You can imagine how excited Pythagoras was when he shared his findings with his pals, a fraternity of eggheads, known as the Pythagoreans. They used to meet in secret to discuss their mathematical discoveries. Only members were allowed to attend. They had a secret emblem, the pentagram. Let's see what the topic is for today.
What's going on?
It's a jam session.
Give me something with a beat.
Shh. So from these eggheads, the Pythagoreans, with their mathematical formula, came the basis of our music of today.
Pythagoras, boy, put it out. Well, I'll be a password egghead.
It was our old friend Pythagoras who discovered that the pentagram was full of mathemagic. The two shorter lines combined exactly equal the third. And this line shows the magic proportions of the famous golden section. The second and third lines exactly equal the fourth. Once again, we have the golden section. But this is only the beginning. Hidden within the pentagram is a secret for creating a golden rectangle, which the Greeks admired for its beautiful proportions and magic qualities. The star contains the golden rectangle many times over. It's a most remarkable shape. It can mathematically reproduce itself indefinitely. All these rectangles have exactly the same proportions. This figure also contains a magic spiral that repeats the proportions of the golden section into infinity. To the Greeks, the golden rectangle represented a mathematical law of beauty. We find it in their classical architecture. The Parthenon, perhaps one of the most famous of early Greek buildings, contains many golden rectangles. These same golden proportions are also found in their sculpture. In the centuries that followed, the golden rectangle dominated the idea of beauty in architecture throughout the Western world. The Cathedral of Notre Dame is an outstanding example. The Renaissance painters knew this secret well. Today, the golden rectangle is very much a part of our modern world. Modern painters have rediscovered the magic of these proportions. Indeed, this ideal proportion is to be found in life itself.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is mathematics. I got mathematical figures like that.
Donald.
Get me to it.
No.
Ideal proportion.
Not quite. No, I'm afraid not. Well, we can't all be mathematically perfect.
Oh, yeah? Yeah, I do like to do it.
Now that you're all pent up in a pentagon, let's see how nature uses this same mathematical form. The petunia. The star jasmine. The starfish. The wax flower. There are literally thousands of members in good standing in nature's Pythagorean Society of the Star. All nature's works have a mathematical logic, and her patterns are limitless. The magic proportions of the golden section are often found in the spirals of nature's designs. The profusion of mathematical forms brings to mind the words of Pythagoras. Everything is arranged according to number and mathematical shape. Yes, there is mathematics in music, in art, in just about everything. And as the Greeks had guessed, the rules are always the same. Well, Donald, did you enjoy your geometrical journey?
Gee, Mr. Spirit, there's a lot more to mathematics than 2 times 2.
That's right, Donald. And you can find mathematics in games, too.
Games? Oh, boy.
Let's begin with a game that's played on squares.
Checkers?
No, chess.
Chess?
A mathematical contest between two minds. It's a game that has been enjoyed for centuries by kings and commoners. In fact, Lewis Carroll, a famous mathematician with a literary mind, used chess as a setting for his classic tale, Through the Looking Glass. Alice found herself face to face with a none too friendly group of chess pieces.
Good heavens, what's this?
Upon my soul, it appears to be a lost pawn.
I'm no pawn. I'm Donald Duck.
He says he's Donald Duck.
Preposterous.
Or it could be an Alice.
Alice?
No, no, no. It's a lost pawn.
Lost pawn? Stop that pawn!
Ow, Mr. Spirit! Ow, Phew, that was close.
Now you can look at this game from a safer perspective. Chess is a game of calculated strategy, and since the board is geometrical, the moves are mathematical. Checkmate, and the game is over.
That's very interesting. What's next?
Practically all games are played on geometrical areas. The baseball field is a diamond.
Oh, boy.
And without mathematics, we couldn't even keep score. Football is played on a rectangle divided by yard lines. Basketball is a game of circles, spheres, and rectangles. Even hopscotch has its multiple squares.
What's next? Get any wins?
No, a mathematical game played on a field of 2 perfect squares, using 3 perfect spheres, and a lot of diamonds. In other words, billiards.
Oh, boy. That's for me.
You know the game, don't you, Donald?
Of course. The cue ball has to hit the other 2 balls. Like this.
Now let's see how an expert at 3-cushion billiards uses his head.
3 cushion?
Yes, The cue ball not only has to hit both the other balls, but it must contact at least 3 cushions before it hits the final ball. One, two, three. One, two, three. It takes an expert to make several shots in succession. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Wow! That was not a good shot.
Luck? No, it's skill. For this game, you have to know all the angles.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's amazing! How does he do it?
First, there's technique. He's striking the cue ball low, so it'll spin backwards. Hitting the ball on the right side will make it hug the rail. These trick shots take a lot of practice.
He missed it!
1, 2, 3.
What's the mathematical about that?
Oh, this game takes precise calculation. He figures out each shot in his head. He could play it like this, but it calls for quite a bit of luck. There is a better choice. For this, he uses the diamond markings on the rail as a mathematical guide. First, he figures the natural angle for hitting the object balls. And then he finds that his cue ball must bounce off the number 3 diamond. Next, he gets ready for the shot, and he needs a number for his cue position. This calls for a different set of numbers.
Very confusing, isn't it?
Not when you get the hang of it. You see, the cue position is 4. Now a simple subtraction. 3 from 4 is 1. So if he shoots for the first diamond, he should make it. It's called playing the diamond system. Natural angle, 2. Cue position, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. 2 from 3.5 is 1.5. So, shoot halfway between the first and second diamonds.
There's nothing to it. The big one. Let's see now. If I hit it here, it'll bounce there, and, no, here. If I hit it here, 4.5 minus 3, 3.5 plus 4 added to 2, then divided into, I guess I should shoot about here.
No, Donald. There's no guesswork to mathematics. It's quite simple. Natural angle for the hit, 2. Cue position, 3.5. How much is 3.5 minus 2?
1.5. Hey, it works! Oh boy, it's a 6. If I hit it here, 3.5 plus 4, 2, 4.5 minus 3, divided by 9,
You're making it tough for yourself, Donald.
How do you like that for mathematics, Mr. Spirit?
Wonderful, Donald. And now you're ready for the most exciting game of all.
Oh boy!
And the playing field for this game is in the mind. Uh-oh. Look at the condition of your mind. Antiquated ideas, bungling, false concepts, superstitions, confusion. To think straight, we'll have to clean house. There, that's more like it. A nice clean sweep. This game is played with circles and triangles. Think of a perfect circle. A perfect circle. Perfect circle. Perfect. Put a triangle inside and turn it. Now spin the circle. And what have you got?
A ball.
Yes, a sphere. The shape of things is first discovered in the mind. Slice off the top, and we have a
magnifying glass.
That's right. A lens is a section of a sphere. All optical instruments are created through mathematics. You see, there's a lot more to mathematics than just numbers and equations. Let's get back to our circle and triangle. Roll it, and we have a
wheel.
The circle has been the basis for many of man's important inventions. The mind can create the most amazing things. If we spin the triangle, we have a
Cone.
slice the cone. The cone is full of useful mathematical shapes. Slice it again. Slice it several times. The orbits of all planets and satellites can be found in the cone. No matter how you slice it, it's always mathematics. A slice like this gives us the reflector of a searchlight. A slice like this, the mirror of a giant telescope. A line on a cone, and we have a drill. And a spring. Now you're ticking.
Number, please.
The mind is the birthplace for all of man's scientific achievements. The mind knows no limits when used properly. Think of a pentagram, Donald. Now put another inside, a third, and a fourth. No pencil is sharp enough to draw as fine as you can think, and no paper large enough to hold your imagination. In fact, it is only in the mind that we can conceive infinity. Mathematical thinking has opened the doors to the exciting adventures of science.
I'll be doggone. I've never seen so many doors before.
Each discovery leads to many others, an endless chain.
What's the matter with these doors? Hey! These doors won't open. They're locked.
Of course they are locked. These are the doors of the future, and the key is...
Mathematics.
Right. Mathematics. The boundless treasures of science are locked behind those doors. In time, they will be opened by the curious and inquiring minds of future generations. In the words of Galileo, mathematics is the alphabet with which God has written the universe.
Well, I know that the cartoons have been a bit long, but I think it was worth it if we really wanted to think about what they were showing us there. If you have noticed, it was full of extremely important details. Just starting the cartoon, we realize that Donald passes through a number 8 and enters this world of numbers. He's passing through the cosmos. 8 is infinity, the universe. Hence, Gothic cathedrals were made precisely with 8 points. It was the union between the human and the divine to go through other dimensions, okay? In other words, the video was already starting well. Then details continually emerge. I would quote the technical explanation of the 5-pointed star from the Pythagoreans, that in truth did not come from them, it comes from further back, but it is the same, you know, since the Tower of Babel, the knowledge that those people had was transmitted through generations, but normally they were always through what we would now call secret societies. But not everyone received that knowledge. It was lost over the years and remained in the hands of some people. And with the pass of time, people who were introduced to this knowledge, not only were they mathematical knowledge, as they show us here, you see that God truly did things perfectly, mathematically, but when Satan evidently does is use the perfection that God has made and pass everything onto his terrain. So, under the insight of showing the perfect and kind part of things, of how everything fits together, he then continues to distort it once again towards his objective, which is to divert people from God. All this knowledge that so often goes unnoticed by us has been used among secret societies for years, you see, to transmit a series of knowledge that they finally end up applying to something more than mathematics. They end up with astrology, they end with great things that are theoretically very good, and that we have seen how precisely they lead to the devil's sector, not to the things of God. There were many things to comment on the Donald Duck video. If you've noticed, when perhaps the part that could have been the most tedious part on the game of the billiards, if you have noticed, just when he finishes that, they tell him that he has to clean his mind, and they begin to tell him a series of words, of preconceptions, etc., that he has to eliminate to receive that knowledge. In fact, this is the way to be able to connect, to understand what comes next, and put your mind in order. That was the equivalent to wanting to say that, be careful, because these things that at first seem disposable are good things. And they show the good part of things. Behind, there is a connection with the satanic. But obviously they are not going to say this. I believe that the video had nothing to waste at all. Many more issues could be analyzed. For example, Alice in Wonderland, which talks about the issue of the mirror. You already know that the mirror for the esoteric world is to go from one dimension to another, a reflection of heaven with earth, earth with heaven, etc., etc. Well, everything works based on the same thing. But you see how easy it is when we are children, seeing these things done attractively suits us very well. Then these concepts, as they pass on well, you will no longer see them as strange or like something that will take you to the dark side, but you are going to see it as knowledge. Then entering secret societies is very positive according to them, because you know more things, and the rest of the people, well, they won't understand, so why give an explanation, right? Although perhaps there will be a time when everyone will be able to understand because there will be an open awareness of everyone for cosmic issues, etc., astrological and so on. Well, that is the knowledge of Satan, it is not the knowledge of God. And if you've noticed, it was talking also to us about how in the end, in the future, through people who will study, all the issues of the future will be revealed. It also said this, more or less. Well, that is why we have biblical prophecies. But, look how well everything is plotted, because the biblical prophecies themselves, many of them, are based on mathematics. We have seen in a previous conference, one of the first ones, how the prophecies about the papacy are mathematically fulfilled. We will continue to see in subsequent Bible studies how there are other time prophecies that are based precisely on mathematics, and that we will be able to demonstrate how exactly they are fulfilled. But, well, the world of Satan, as we already know, is going to plagiarize the things of God. He will simply give it a touch or a twist towards his side, right? Well, now, what we are going to see is something that is quite extensive. If I remember correctly, there are about 50 images, and when we finish, I will tell you who wrote it, because it appears right there. It is a development of a bit of the history of how modern spiritualism was born, with the Fox sisters in the United States. Ellen White also wrote about it in the book of The Great Controversy. It is worth reading how Spiritism was born. Here you will also see it reflected together with other things. The truth is that I believe that everything written here has no waste, and even more when you see who wrote it in the end. We will try to see if we can read it in its entirety, because time is already running out. The Ouija, a means of communication with the beyond or a threshold to the unknown. The symbol they use in this case is the six-pointed star. Sometimes the five-pointed star is used, sometimes the six-point star, it depends. But in this case, what is a contact for the afterlife for? This is what is known as opening dimensional gates, so that the spirits can pass into our dimension. When someone is doing Ouija, nothing more and nothing less is being done as what is known as opening the dimensional doors, so that spirits can manifest. There will be people that will say this is nonsense, this is not true, this is a solemn stupidity. Others who have had certain experiences will surely know that they are not nonsense at all. Let's see how all this works a little. To enter the fascinating and reckless world of the Ouija board, we must take an extensive journey where it all begins. In the unknown world of the occult, under the mantle of death, spirits and natural receptors or mediums give rise to this way of communicating that is called spiritism or also mediumship. The medium-like is the paranormal communication between two or more dimensions. It is studied by parapsychology, and it offers us two ranges of phenomena that lend themselves to confusion. Here we will deal exclusively with the spiritual aspect, and we will refer to this every time mention is made of mediumness. There are many people who, in a clear and refutable way for them, have proof of the immortality of the human being, but more than that of the man, of his soul. Before continuing in reading this writing, we must clarify or refer people who have not seen the topic about what is after death. It is essential to understand if there is any wrong matter in this writing, because obviously we have already proven the immortality of the soul biblically to be false. It is a satanic invention. But well, with this basis, when you see who wrote this, you will understand why sometimes it says certain things. These tests are usually personal and have innumerable opinions that I do not intend to begin to explain and detail at this time. What we are really interested in discussing is the topic of the Ouija board. I will limit myself to mediumistic evidence, since mediumship seems to be the source that provides it in the greatest amount, using in part the expressive modes that were used before modern parapsychology took the reins of everything paranormal in an eagerness to try to obtain an illuminating scientific explanation to give credibility to an issue that is still in doubt today. Throughout time in this regard, there have been two diametrically opposed positions. Mediumship exists, the phenomenon is a fact, but the interpretation of this phenomenon is the one that differs between each other. While spiritualists support the idea of the intervention of spirits from the beyond, scientists deny any intervention of the spiritual and believe that the phenomenon could belong to the collective unconscious, something that, by the way, has not been able to be fully scientifically demonstrated either. In the Book of Mediums by Allan Kardec, the father of Spiritism, all or almost all of the existing mediumistic faculties are specified, faculties that allow a supposed intelligent relationship between the spiritual and physical worlds. There is a spiritual world that relates, comes into contact, and communicates with our plane through special faculties that certain people have. Have you noticed, now I'll make a little stop here, how when Donald Duck enters that world, there is someone who speaks to him and says, "Who are you?" And he says, "It's the spirit of something, I don't know what." Well, he entered another dimension, a spiritual dimension. Well, look how what seems like a children's game with cartoons is in fact based on what spiritualism is. Hence the importance of knowing what our children are watching. When they go to the cinema or watch television or watch a video or DVD movie or whatever, what are they seeing? What lessons are they receiving? Because their minds will be marked with great ease. There is a spiritual world that relates, comes into contact, and communicates with our plane through special faculties that certain people have. You already know that it is said that there are people who have faculties that others do not have, and through these, they are used to receive these spirits or whatever, these communications. We have already given our opinion that both these faculties and those communications have existed for millennia. Everything began to have a true history for the world just at the moment in which it is said that the history of Spiritism begins. A little history here, you see an image of a Ouija board, in this case with the 5-pointed star. It all started in Hydesville, United States, with the knocks and noises that the Fox sisters heard. These types of mysterious noises and knocks, because they are so abundant and appear unexpectedly, are perhaps the paranormal phenomena in whose existence almost everyone has faith. In the case of the Fox sisters, the knocks were so insistent that they came to believe that they were not casual noises, but perhaps coming from an invisible and intelligent being that wanted to say something. Indeed, that was what it was about. Nobody could imagine that in the middle of a century of industrial advance, thanks to science and technology, and in the heart of a country that was awakening to industrial gigantism like the United States, the mystery could strike with unspeakable viciousness on the humble wooden walls of a remote townhouse. The blows of the goat, as described by the first of the girls who had the opportunity to hear them, was going to make the hair stand on end in a society that was torn between superstition and an almost doctrinal conception of industrial advance and scientific progress. Well, as you see, the little girl said the blows of the goat, a symbol of who? Of a dead person? Something that has the figure of Satan as a symbol. The little assimilable story that gave rise to modern spiritualism began on December 2nd, 1847 in Hydesville, in a modest wooden house belonging to the Methodist pastor John D. Fox. The house is still a center of spiritualist pilgrimages in Arcadia, a small town in Wayne County, New York State, and few people dare to spend a solitary night under its roof. I'm not surprised. That December night, in the room of Margaret and Kate, the pastor's two daughters, noises began to be heard with certain frequency and without apparent cause. On March 31st, 1848, around 11:30 at night, began what would lead to the birth of a discipline that has led to enormous human scientific efforts to demonstrate such types of events. The truly shocking blows manifested themselves with an unknown intensity. violent movements of a vibrating type, almost thunderous, lasted until the first light of the morning. Attention to a vibrating type. Vibrations, resonances, chords are words widely used to describe certain perceptions in which the esoteric world has a lot to do with. We will talk about all this later. Interspersed with short sounds that resembled knocks with knuckles on a board, which were then reproduced with a roar similar to the unloading of a cart of stones on a wooden platform. According to the Fox sisters, with the way of expressing themselves typical of the daughters of a pastor and the rural environment in which they lived. The fundamental characteristic intuition of mediums drove the first spirit medium recorded in history, challenging those unknown forces capable of causing such a terrifying rattling. She snapped her fingers, and with a trembling but firm voice she exclaimed, "If you are even the same devil, do everything the same as me." Well, for a Methodist daughter, the girl was starting out well, huh? From that moment on, her border, until then considered untouchable by the living, was broken. According to the spiritualist interpretation, the tangible world and the spiritual world entered into communication for the first time using a precise and effective code. Later we will show you writings by Ellen White that talk about more or less these topics, so that we can see what dimensions everything came to have and will come to have. The girl was amazed at the unexpected response of who she considered to be the devil, since each snap of her fingers was repeated with a blow on a closet. Some of the answers formulated through the simple code seemed to baffle the terrified and impressed witnesses. Thus, when Mrs. Fox asked the entity if it knew how many children she had had throughout her marriage, she obtained a response consisting of 7 blows. There was apparently a mistake here. She had only 6 children, but her husband ended up remembering a miscarriage suffered months after the wedding. The answer had been completely correct, although the entity made no distinction between the living and the dead. It only responded for the children that had been born. Thus, that entity that manifested itself through blows seemed to be endowed with a different evaluative system from that of those who asked the questions. Birth of the Ouija. Curious, the little drawing in the middle, right? With a little eye for a change. The brothers William and Isaac Fuld designed the board as we know it today in the 19th century in Baltimore, Maryland, United States, and patented it under the name Ouija, from the French oui and the German ja, whose translation would be yes, yes. The game is made up of 2 parts: the polished wooden board with the alphabet letters arranged on the edge of a semicircle, the numbers 0 to 9, and 2 words, yes and no, and sometimes goodbye to warn that the present spirit is ending the interview. Curious, eh? On top you can say, well, up to here. And on top of it is placed a small plaque, a movable object, generally heart-shaped, with wheels or felt as its base, which facilitates its movement around the board, forming messages. The players rest a finger on this pointer, which moves seemingly directed by the dead, and spells out answers to questions asked to the board. The other, more modern system is performed with a glass or glass cup and is called vasography. Hey, I'll give you a detail. The spirit that theoretically communicated with the Fox sisters was that of someone who had died in that house, if I remember correctly. At least, that's what the spirit said. And that they found the remains when they dug. So, was it a real dead person who showed up there? Curiously, the Ouija board has never been officially considered a device for contacting the dead, but rather as a talking game. But after the 2 world wars, the demand for Ouija boards increased due to the interest of widows in communicating with their husbands that were killed in combat, and the Fult brothers could barely respond to the demand. Then, in 1966, the American toy manufacturer Parker Brothers, does it sound familiar to you? Monopoly? They bought the rights to the board And since then, it is estimated that 25 million units have been sold in America and Europe. How many people have done spiritualism with these boards? Previously, the Egyptians used a ring suspended over a table with hieroglyphics inscribed to contact spirits. Do you realize what they used? A ring. What shape is a ring? A square? It's round. What was it symbolizing? That there would be a dimensional door. The Roman patricians also organized very large meetings to establish contacts with the afterlife. And in pre-Hispanic America, indigenous tribes used a board called Scudilact to search for missing people, lost objects, and for some religious rituals. It seems that in ancient times, boards similar to the Ouija board were already used. In classic Greece, Pythagoras and his disciples used a board very similar to the current one to contact the invisible and transcendent world of spirits. Ah, haven't we seen this man in the Donald Duck cartoons? Oh, so they didn't dedicate themselves only to making music, it seems, huh? At the same time, in China, similar tables were used for the same purpose. You see that Spiritism was spread throughout the whole world. Paganism, under many different forms of religions, beliefs, encompassed or was practically everywhere. There was only one people who theoretically despised this by divine command, and that was the Jewish people. But they also fell into following the things of Satan many times. Remember how Saul went to contact the fortune teller of Endor. We already said it. At the same time, similar tables were used in China for the same purpose. Therefore it reached, and you see to what extent, to the east, how not. Will the entity that throughout the centuries inspired the enlightened to contact the afterlife be the same? Or did that contact take place to open a threshold to something unknown, an opening that only human beings can achieve due to their physical capacity, curiosity and grief in the face of events as radically strong as the death of a loved one or the desire to know the future? There are two theories that attempt to give a reasonable scientific explanation to the Ouija board phenomenon. One is based on the involuntary muscle spasms that the participants of the game have and that cause the movements of the pointer. This theory seems unreasonable because it does not explain why the messages are coherent. The other position, according to other scientists, points to the individual and collective subconscious as the author of the movements that occur during the game, which would explain the logic and coherence of the messages. Furthermore, this theory seems to be demonstrated with an experiment carried out under scientific conditions. Such an experiment consisted of the participants being blindfolded and the letters being disordered. The result of this experience was that the movements that were produced were disjointed and failed to construct any message. I would explain the experience of a friend of mine who was doing Ouija with his friends in a friend's house, and they began to theoretically contact a spirit. And that spirit was telling them a series of things. When a book suddenly falls from the shelf where they were, it falls to the floor, it opens to a page where there was precisely the name of the theoretical spirit that was contacting him. You can already imagine how his face and that of his companions looked, and what could have happened next, right? Well, let them explain this, if they can do so, scientifically. However, parapsychologists question this theory and justify their reluctance with the evidence provided by groups of practitioners who have discovered things that none of their members were aware of. For example, names of the deceased, dates and facts that they were completely unaware of. The spiritualist explanation stipulates that the beginning of the game opens a door to other dimensions that allows us to contact both deceased beings, extraterrestrials, and other entities from different planes or dimensions. Basically, we are talking about the opening of a threshold. Well, you already know who are the extraterrestrials that contacts human beings. We've already said it more than once, right? Recommendations according to experts to avoid suffering any lack of control on an emotional or psychological level if you do a Ouija session. They are even saying this, things you have to avoid. The first fundamental rule is to have an already formed criterion and an established personality, which is why children and adolescents are discouraged. Curiously, I've met tons of children and adolescents practicing Ouija. Let us never become obsessed with such a practice or with the messages. This phenomenon creates a strong and dangerous addiction for many people. Not only this, but a great fear, because I met a person who asked what day he would die. Since then, that boy went crazy. But okay, let's move on to more things. It should never be practiced by people who are psychologically immature or who are very suggestible, nor should anyone who is going through a bad emotional moment. Let us always maintain a critical and analytical spirit in the face of the phenomenon. Let's not believe at face value everything that is transmitted to us through it. Be careful with half-truths. Sometimes they are more dangerous than lies. Let's practice with a specialized person with experience. I remember a man who asked which is the true church, and the spirit answered the Christian Seventh-day Adventist Church. And that man became an Adventist through this. So we can say, what? Satan tells him the truth, and it takes him to God's ground? That was where the danger was. How, even by telling the truth, he put spiritualism inside a church because that person had arrived through spiritism. So, how could he say, this is bad? Where's the argument then? Satan's traps work well, right? There are many stories that emerge around the game and many questions that remain unanswered. Some people who have practiced it assure that as long as you respect the board, there is no danger. Other participants advise against its use because they consider it dangerous, and this danger comes in two aspects. Those who believe in paranormal events because of the catastrophic events that occur or may occur, according to the stories told, and those who do not believe in the paranormal consider it's dangerous for the psychological health of the participants. As we said before, the theorist and founder of spiritualism was Allan Kardec, a doctor born in Lyon in 1804 into a family of magistrates. He published different works, and some of the most important are the Book of the Spirits, the Book of Mediums, the Gospel according to Spiritism, Genesis, Miracles and Predictions according to Spiritism. Almost nothing, eh? Kardec died in Paris 1869. His theories about the afterlife, spirits, death, incarnation and reincarnation constitutes the fundamental basis of spiritualism. So, for example, in his works we can read, Spiritism comes to establish the kingdom of charity and solidarity announced by Christ. Its taught morality is therefore essentially Christian. What Jesus said in a parable, Spiritism enunciates in clear and unequivocal terms. Oh my, hey? He's saying, do you realize it's true? He talks about Christ, but look how, bam, immediately it takes it to his field. So many times Jesus is spoke about, like Jesus is one thing, Christ is another, and we all have a Christ inside. Satan always works in these terms, confusing. He relies on a certain part to destroy the truth, and in such a subtle way that it goes in very well. Look how even here he is talking to us about reincarnation in spiritualism. Well, you see, whoever wants to continue believing these stories, well, go on. Spiritism is the third revelation of the law of God. If the law of the Old Testament is personified by Moses and that of the New Testament by Christ, imagine. The points that we are going to develop below are made following Spiritist theories and studying part of the immense bibliography that exists on the subject. Currently, Spiritism constitutes a doctrine that has millions of followers throughout the world and is growing. Communication and mediumistic practice. mediumistic communications that come from high levels of spirituality, from guides or from authorized spiritual friends and family, have been and will always be negative and even harmful communications. Although the vast majority of men ignore it, the less evolved beings of the spiritual world move or live in the densest layers of the Earth's atmosphere. They are fluidly heavy and cannot rise without help from above. They can do nothing with human beings more spiritualized than them, but they exert their influence with those who are at the same level as them. Are you seeing something that doesn't add up here? Take a look at how we should analyze things very well, because when they are showing us something that goes against Spiritism, at the same time they are giving us something that does not really quite add up. And without realizing it, they are favoring Spiritism. Or realizing it. I don't know. I hope not. On the one hand, it speaks to us about less evolved beings from the spiritual world that move or live in denser layers of the Earth's atmosphere, and that cannot rise without higher help. So, what does it mean that these people are where? In the purgatory? In a limbo? Where are they? They cannot access heaven, but instead they exert influence with people who are at that level. What is this? This is already spiritualism. Because the dead are dead and know nothing. Men help or harm each other mentally. Beings from the spiritual world can also help or harm us, since the physical barrier does not prevent spiritual and mental affinities. Well, if we point out that some are spirits of God and others are spirits of Satan, perhaps we understand that. We want you to understand well why many precautions must be taken with the exercise of mediumship. A lower spiritual entity, when it communicates, is sometimes capable of playing all the roles while not being discovered. This type of being neither knows who it is, nor remembers who it has been. However, you can get to know mediumship over time, from here to playing the easy and almost always welcomed role of deceased relative, favorite saint, spiritual guide. There is not a single step. So, what are they telling us here? You see again that there is a mixture? To be in optimal conditions to be able to understand that there are spiritual interventions, it is necessary to have appropriate psychic faculties. If you do not have them, it usually happens as always, the unbeliever continues denying, the skeptic does not let go of his doubts, and the believer reaffirms his convictions. The result is different when something wonderful and surprising happens to a person. As surprising and wonderful can be the tests that are constantly offered to us. It is not always a reward for those who search, and it is for those who find them despite not looking for them. Amado Nervo, distinguished poet, lost his most loved one and cried uncontrollably for him. Believing in the immortality of the soul, he did not stop looking for a way to communicate with his dead loved one, and only got silence in response. Lovers of good poetry and emotional sensitivity won a beautiful book made with the suffering and desperation of a man who did not stop begging the afterlife without any result. Another well-known case is that of Houdini's widow, who spared no expense in order to communicate with her deceased husband. Other people, on the other hand, suffer the same from the loss of a loved one, and without having tried, enter into a spiritual relationship with the loved one, despite them being cases that are not very valid and insufficient to be taken for granted. So, do you want to contact the dead person? Are you going to do this? Yes? And why don't we think that the dead person cannot be contacted? Because the dead are dead, and they are dead until Jesus returns. There is no resurrection. So, do you realize the importance of knowing what the Bible says, inspired by God, saying that the immortality of the soul is a fraud, a satanic deception? It opens the door to Satan's agents, him and his devils. Mind over matter? But the Ouija board is one of the paranormal phenomena that can be easily simulated, and even without being a hoax, it can have other explanations. James Randall, a stage magician who is skeptical of the paranormal, has suggested that normal involuntary muscle contractions, known as ideomotor actions, are responsible for the pointer's movements across the board. Well, you know that anyone who doesn't want to believe won't believe. But be careful, because I know of people who didn't believe in anything, and when they found themselves in a session there in the middle where stranger things happened than those that I have spoke about, they have ended up believing that there was something, and they radically ran out of atheism and got the jitters forever. However, to many researchers and practitioners, it seems doubtful that these slight twitches can cause a hand to move across the needleboard to spell coherent sentences. This theory also presupposes that the message received through the Ouija board comes from the subconscious of one or more users, but there are many known cases in which the Ouija board has revealed information that was unknown to all participants, and judging by the number of cases in which Ouija board use has traumatized and mentally altered participants, there must be more to this game than just muscle spasms. Mediums are simple spokespersons for spirits. Following Kardec's teachings, he states, if the Spiritist doctrine was a purely human conception, it would have no other guarantee than the enlightenment of the one who had conceived it, and no one on earth could have a well-founded claim to possess the truth alone. If the spirits that have been revealed had manifested themselves to a single man, nothing would guarantee it, because it would be necessary to believe their word. God, he says, God wanted the new revelation to reach men by a more authentic, faster path, entrusting the spirits with taking it to both poles, manifesting itself everywhere, and granting no one the exclusive privilege of hearing his word. Under the mantle of God, bam, they've already sneaked it in, right? Spirits are far from possessing the absolute truth. Not all of them are given the ability to penetrate certain mysteries. Their knowledge is proportionate to their purification. Purification? What things, eh? The spirits of a higher order are those who have divested themselves of earthly ideas and concerns. What is it saying here now? In their communications, the superior spirits proceed with extreme caution and do not address the great questions of Spiritist doctrine except gradually, as our intelligence becomes capable of understanding truths of a higher order. To me, this sounds like secret societies, Gnosticism, etc., etc. That as you learn more, well, then you prepare yourself, you will receive other knowledge, etc., etc. But at the same time, notice how basically it is copied from what God does. God cannot give total light. Why? Because in the beginning, if the person is not prepared, he is not going to receive it. It has to be given progressively. Not only to an individual, it can be to a congregation. It can be to a town. It can be to more, right? Satan copies exactly the same thing. He always does the same thing, and then he adds his touch, his personal twist to do his thing, and that's it. Interview with Divaldo Pereira Franco. Divaldo Pereira, of Brazilian nationality, is one of the most representative figures of Spiritism. A follower of Allan Kardec, he has published numerous works, founded various institutions, and is without a doubt one of the most prestigious people in this field. You see that everything here appears under Egyptian mythology, right? Question: can spiritualism be considered a religion, or is it more of a philosophy? Studying the Spiritist doctrine, the wisdom of the Spirit's answers is often compared, because the success of an answer depends on the question that is asked. The questions that Allan Kardec asked the Spirits were so remarkable that the answers were magnificent. They became unsurpassable. Spiritism is the essential point of all the religions: God, the soul, immortality, moral laws. Spiritualism is therefore a religion. It is a science because they have mediumship, the laboratory of experimental psychology. Look what he is telling us here, and that Ellen White said that it was going to be used by Satan in the end time to unite the whole world under one umbrella against the people of God. Here it is not talking about the Sunday, right? But it is talking about what? God, the soul, immortality of the soul, the moral laws. It says that they are essential points of all religions. Are you realizing what it is saying? That for believing in the immortality of the soul as a basic point, all the religions are going to fall into the great deception. Thank God, we know that immortality of the soul is a lie. That is why the people of God who keep the Sabbath, just when there are still more satanic manifestations openly, this will be the point that will determine who is on God's side and who is from the devil, because there will be no more sides. It is philosophy because it explains who man is, where he comes from, where he's going, and why he suffers. Does spiritualism explain this? It is religion because it produces the connection of the creature with its creator. Amazing. The word religion in Latin, religare, means to bind again. If Spiritism links us back to God, it is a religion. But it is not just another religion, it is the religion, because it was not made by men. The facts appeared first, and then the explanations. Religions arose from explanations seeking facts that have not been found until today. Is that true? It's not, it is a lie. Spiritism is the religion of the integral man because it has no priesthood, it has no formulas, it has no ritual. It is a religion of the soul with God, an exchange between the spirit and divinity, with an ethic deeply based on the gospel of Jesus, but not on the words of the gospel, but on the spirit. So, yes, Jesus, yes, okay, but not in the words of the gospel, but in the spirit. Well, these are the Gnostic movements. They do believe in Jesus, but the words of the gospel, no, that is altered, that's manipulated, that's I don't know what. Do you realize? It all goes to the same thing, everything. The Apostle Paul already denounced the Gnostic movements within the first Christians. What was he denouncing? Spiritism put inside and posing as Christianity. And here I wanted to explain something to you. It says that religions emerged with explanations, etc., not with facts found until today. Haven't we demonstrated the facts, how the prophecies have been fulfilled? Biblical archaeology, as history sings for itself. Well, they say no. You also see how he is telling us that it is the way to join to the Creator. Do we need Spiritism to join the Creator? What shamelessness. But then, what it is already hinting to us is that it is an extraordinary religion that is above all. You know, when Ellen White wrote, she was talking about a time coming when something would be manifested, something similar to what the letter of the 3 world wars says, which we have shown so many times. There will come a time when the pure doctrine of Lucifer will manifest. Ellen White says it in other words, that when Satan himself appears, posing as Jesus, all this will be definitively credited. Well, this is what these gentlemen are preparing the ground for when that moment arrives. Why is spiritualism discredited, they ask him? Due to ignorance of it. The best way to combat an idea is not to study it. The gratuitous enemies of spiritualism do not know it, and so they lie, take advantage of popular ignorance, and say that spiritualism is exactly what it is not. As mediumship is an organic physiological faculty, many people who possess it are considered spiritualists without being one. And as dishonesty is a characteristic of the human personality, there are many who use mediumship, calling themselves spiritists, to be well accepted while doing evil. Well. Spiritism is not to blame for the existence of unworthy people any more than science is to blame for the existence of adventurers. The discredit also results from a systematic campaign carried out on the one hand by religions and on the other by scientific preconception. But all those who have studied spiritualism in depth have surrendered to the evidence. Of course they surrender to the evidence. When a person enters this little world and sees evidence, because Satan does not stay still, nor does his fallen angels, how can they not believe? The curious thing is that they say that there have been religions that discredit spiritualism. You've seen how before in the first part of the conferences we had talked about a father who also spoke about these topics in the sects. He throws everything down. He says he's contrary to it, and other Protestant religions too. But instead, everyone believes in the immortality of the soul. Therefore, they are already giving way to spiritualism. Perhaps that is, they are contradicting themselves. A scientist said, for example, I was a convinced materialist, and so complete that in my intellectual experience there was no place for spiritual belief. Therefore, however, the facts are there. They are tremendous. They defeated me. I do not know a single example of someone who has sincerely studied Spiritism who has not surrendered to the evidence of their information. This man was Cromwell F. Barley, father of the International Telegraph and Submarine Cables. William Crookes wrote, I can assure you, he was referring to the members of the Dialectical Society of London, that the facts are real, and he confessed, I am a spiritist because the reality of the spiritist facts convinced me. Of course, when one sees manifestations, are you going to say that you don't believe when you see what you see? You know, there will come a time when if we despise the biblical writings and we don't have them well stored in our heads, what we see is going to completely confuse us, to the point where the very chosen ones are going to be staggered, chosen for salvation. Which means that we are going to see such things of such magnitude that even the most believing believer, if he is not well established in the biblical texts, to the law and the testimony, they will succumb to the deceptions of Satan. Hence the importance of studying our Bibles every day. And whoever says that the Bibles are manipulated, etc., we've already given enough details to know if something is manipulated or not. So always study the Bibles thoroughly, and we pray to God truly, or soon we are all going to fall into these deceptions of Satan, because this is going to get worse very soon. We can therefore say in conclusion that ignorance of spiritualism, like any science, any philosophy, religion, etc., makes us assume something different from its reality. So what are they telling us? Let us study Spiritism, because if you study, you will be convinced. They are not going to tell you, of course, no, stay away from this because it is a diabolical question. No, study it. And people, out of curiosity, so many times, let's see if this is like that, and wham, they're already there. They've already opened the door to Satan. Well, let's continue a little more, and we'll leave the conference here for today. Ouija, according to Professor Ascanio, researcher. Of all the magical, esoteric, or mantic techniques that exist, there is one that especially catches my attention as a study, not as a practice, and this is the Ouija. I like to study the effects hypothetically caused after practicing the Ouija board, especially in young kids. My. What makes this practice so dangerous? Certainly the Ouija board is what causes suicides, strange accidents, poltergeists, etc. Well, the Ouija board is a magic, like rune cards or simple and defenseless tea leaves. All divination systems and so on. The problem is who uses them. Any esoteric practice opens Pandora's box, and they move in an endless energies of our own and those of others that we then have to know how to balance. Own and foreign energies. They are already saying that obviously there are energies that do not come from the human being, that come from outside. But they say you have to know how to balance. Yin, yang, does all this sound familiar to you? White, black, no. Good and evil exist because without one there would not be the other. And that's such nonsense that they say because they want to despise what God tells us in the Bible about how evil began. Well, whoever wants to convince themselves that someone can balance these things and dominate them, he can think again. Because if someone believes that they are going to dominate Satan and his fallen angels by being a common man, they have it very badly. A teenager in itself is a bank of boiling energies. When these come to light, they cause any phenomenon which normally does not come out because they are unconsciously repressed. What happens when the game goes into action? Well, all the controls of the boy or girl who plays Ouija are disinhibited. Is it because of the Ouija, or is it because of the excuse? Now, there is a non-palpable reason, since it cannot be proven that it was for that reason or not. When they tell me about it, they all agree on one thing: they are normal people with no problems. But deep down there is always a problem of family or sexual repression. This reminds me a little of Freud, huh? My advice is always the same: do not play Ouija board if there is no person with experience in this field. Oh yes, you can get experience on this now. And kids should never play even with experienced players, not only because of their own problems. We must always think that there are other unstable energies that can be disturbed and disturb us. Well, what's being said here, right? Think that the spirits of the dead are as close or far as we leave them. And just as we call them and they come, they are not always the ones we think, nor do they leave as they come. My. Our problems demand our solutions, since no one but ours is the responsibility of life. No spirit better than ours knows what our path is. And the desire for command over others, even if it is beyond life, makes us forget to organize and command ourselves. As if we could dominate all things. The biblical text says, "There is a path that seems right to man, and its end is the path of perdition," or death. Well, you see. Well, we are going to leave it here. We will continue next week with this information that is here. We will analyze it to start assembling, or rather disassembling, the lies that Satan has been inventing throughout so many years of history, which began with the possessed snake in the Garden of Eden, and that some say that this was a vulgar myth. If they knew that this was true, they would realize where all this comes from. May God help us not to put ourselves in the mouth of the wolf. And what's more, may He help us to take care of our children and to know how to educate them in the Word of God so they do not fall into these savages of Spiritism. Well, may God help us with this, because we will need it, and a lot. Thank you very much.